I stared at the text message on my phone for the third time that morning, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something different. "I'm moving out. Don't try to stop me." That was it. No explanation, no conversation. Just Marcus telling me he was leaving our house, the same house we'd bought together 4 years ago with our combined down payment and dreams written all over every wall. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just gotten home from the office after celebrating my promotion to Senior Vice President of Marketing at Ashford and Associates. My team had taken me out for lunch. There were champagne toasts. My boss, Jennifer, had hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. I'd worked for that title for 7 years. 7 years of staying late, missing dinner with my husband, skipping vacations to meet deadlines, and finally, it had paid off. The salary bump was substantial too, an extra $75,000 a year, plus a signing bonus of $30,000 that would hit my account by Friday. And now Marcus was leaving me because of it. The thing that made my hands shake wasn't even the message itself. It was the fact that when I'd walked through the front door that afternoon with that huge news burning in my chest, ready to tell him everything, ready to celebrate with the man I'd built my entire adult life around, Marcus had taken one look at my face and said, "You got it, didn't you?" There was no joy in his voice, no excitement for me, just this flat, cold observation, like he'd been waiting for something terrible to happen, and I'd finally delivered. I'd tried to play it cool at first. "Yeah, they offered it to me this morning. I'm so excited. I wanted to surprise you with dinner tonight. I made reservations at Marcello's." Marcello's was our place. We'd been going there for anniversaries and big celebrations since we were dating. Marcus had just stared at me. Then he'd walked upstairs without saying a word. Now it was 10 minutes later, and the text had come through. I was still standing in the kitchen, still holding my phone, still wearing my work clothes, still smelling like the expensive perfume I'd splurged on for the celebration lunch. Let me back up, though. Because this didn't come out of nowhere, even though it felt like it did. Marcus and I had met in college at the University of Michigan. I was studying business administration. He was studying architecture. We'd met at a party in the spring of junior year, and I remember thinking he was the most beautiful person I'd ever seen. Tall, with dark curly hair and these warm brown eyes that actually looked at you when you talked to him. He'd wanted to be a designer, not just any architect, but someone who created buildings that meant something, buildings that changed how people felt when they walked into them. We'd gotten married 6 years ago, right after I landed my first job at Ashford and Associates. Marcus had taken a job with a mid-sized architecture firm in downtown Chicago, the kind of place that did good work but wasn't flashy. He'd been happy there mostly, or at least, I'd thought he was happy. He came home, we'd cook dinner together, we'd talk about our days. On weekends, we'd go to brunch with friends, take walks along the lakefront, plan our future. Our house was in Evanston, a 3-bedroom colonial with a front porch and a little garden in the back, where Marcus had planted tomatoes and basil. It was modest by Chicago standards. We'd bought it for $485,000 with a 30-year mortgage. My parents had helped with the down payment. Marcus's parents had offered too, but his father had been laid off from his job as a plant manager, so they were dealing with their own financial stress. We'd managed without their help, though it had been tight. For the first 3 years of our marriage, everything had felt balanced. I was climbing the ladder at Ashford and Associates, junior account manager, then senior account manager, then director of marketing. Marcus was working on some interesting projects at his firm. We'd take vacations. We'd have friends over for dinner parties. We'd talk about kids, maybe in a few years, once things settled down. But then, about 2 years ago, something had shifted. My career had accelerated rapidly. I'd landed a huge client, a tech startup called Velocity that was about to go public, and I'd basically lived at the office for 4 months to manage their rebrand and pre-IPO marketing campaign. Velocity's IPO had been massively successful. The founder, this guy named David Chen, had specifically requested that I be kept on as their primary contact. That contract alone was now bringing in almost $2 million annually to the firm, and I was the person responsible for it. My salary had jumped, my title had changed. I was suddenly in meetings with executives. I was traveling to San Francisco, New York, Boston, and Marcus had become quieter. He'd stopped talking about his own work. When I'd ask him about his day, he'd just say, "Same old thing," and change the subject. He'd stopped coming to my work events. When Jennifer had invited both of us to the firm's holiday party last year, Marcus had said he wasn't feeling well. When the team had taken me out to celebrate landing a new client, he'd said he had to work late. When my parents had come to visit, and my mom had asked about his architectural projects, he'd given these vague answers about how things at the firm were fine, but nothing exciting was happening. I'd noticed it, but I hadn't known what to do about it. I loved my job. I was good at it. I wasn't going to apologize for being successful. And honestly, I'd been so caught up in the velocity account and everything else that I hadn't pushed him on it. When he'd seemed withdrawn, I'd just assumed it was stress about his own work. When he'd turned down invitations to go out with my colleagues, I'd assumed he was tired. When he'd stopped making plans for us to do things together, I thought maybe he was just going through a phase. But here's what I should have seen. Marcus had stopped looking at me the way he used to. Somewhere in the last 2 years, I'd become the person who was always on her phone, the person who missed dinner, the person whose career had become the center of our entire life. And he'd become the person who waited at home. Still, I'd told myself we were fine. We had a good marriage, we had a nice house, we had plans. Sure, maybe we weren't as connected as we'd been in the beginning, but that was normal, right? That's what happened when you got older, when life got busier, when you had responsibilities. And then I got promoted. When Jennifer had called me into her office that Tuesday morning, I'd been absolutely certain it was good news. She'd smiled when I walked in. She'd stood up and closed the door behind me. She'd said, "Ashley, sit down. I want to talk to you about the future." And then she'd told me that the board had approved the creation of a new position specifically for me, Senior Vice President of Marketing, reporting directly to the CEO. The salary was substantial. The bonus was generous. The job was everything I'd worked for. I'd cried in her office, happy tears, proud tears, the kind of tears you cry when you realize that all those late nights and missed dinners and sacrificed weekends had actually meant something, that I hadn't just been working for nothing, that I'd actually accomplished something real. And I'd been so eager to get home and tell Marcus. I'd imagined him sweeping me up and spinning me around the way he used to do when something good happened. I'd imagined him taking me out to Marcello's without a reservation, charming the host into finding us a table, ordering expensive wine, celebrating me the way a husband is supposed to celebrate his wife's success. Instead, he'd texted me that he was leaving. I set my phone down on the marble counter of our beautiful kitchen, the kitchen we'd renovated together 2 years ago, and I waited. Part of me thought maybe he'd come back downstairs. Maybe he'd want to talk about it. Maybe we could work through whatever this was. But he didn't come back downstairs. Around 7 o'clock, I heard him dragging a suitcase across the hardwood floor upstairs. The sound was loud and deliberate, like he wanted me to hear it. Like he wanted me to know exactly what he was doing. I stood in the kitchen with my hands shaking, listening to my husband pack his life away. When he came down the stairs, he had one large suitcase and a duffel bag. He didn't look at me. He just walked toward the front door. "Marcus," I said. My voice sounded small. "Can we please just talk about this?" He paused at the door. His hand was on the frame. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle working beneath his skin. "There's nothing to talk about," he said quietly. "This is what you wanted. You got your promotion. You got your big title. You got everything you wanted. So now I'm going to go get what I want." "What do you want?" I asked. I was crying now, though I wasn't sure when that had started. "I want you. I want us. I want to figure this out." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were so cold that I barely recognized him. "You want me to be happy for you," he said. "You want me to celebrate you. You want me to be the supporting character in the movie of your life. Well, I'm tired of being a supporting character. I'm tired of waiting for you to notice that I exist." And then he opened the door and walked out into the October evening. I watched him load his bags into his car, a Honda Civic that was paid off, that I'd helped him buy, and drive away. I stood in the doorway as his taillights disappeared down the street, and I stood there for a long time after that, even after he was gone, even after the street was empty and dark. I was still standing there when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus, just 2 words: "I'm done." I stared at my phone for 3 days straight, waiting for him to come home or at least to call. He didn't. Instead, I got formal text messages about logistics. He'd be picking up more of his things on Thursday when I was at work. He'd already opened a separate bank account and would be splitting the mortgage payment 50-50 until we figured out the details. He'd hired a divorce attorney. A divorce attorney! We'd been married 6 years, and he'd hired a lawyer before we'd even had a real conversation about what was happening. My mom called that Friday afternoon. I didn't answer. She called again and again. Finally, I picked up. "Ashley, honey, what's going on? Marcus's mother just called me in tears. She said Marcus moved out. She said you two are getting divorced. Tell me that's not true." I couldn't tell her it wasn't true, because it was true, or at least, it was becoming true, and I had no idea how to stop it. "We're working through some things," I said quietly. It was the biggest lie I'd told in my adult life. "Some things? Sweetheart, marriage doesn't just fall apart because of some things. What happened? Did you have an affair? Did he?" "No, Mom, nothing like that. He's upset about my promotion. He thinks I don't care about him anymore." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "And do you?" my mother asked. "Care about him?" I wanted to scream. Of course I cared about him. I loved him. I would have given up the promotion in a heartbeat if he'd asked me to. But he hadn't asked. He'd just left. Instead, I told my mother I had to go and hung up the phone. The week Marcus was supposed to pick up his things, I made a decision. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to slink around my own house like I'd done something wrong. So instead of going to the office, I stayed home. I made coffee. I sat in the kitchen with my laptop and pretended to work, but really I was just waiting. He arrived at 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon with his best friend David. They loaded up boxes with Marcus's clothes, his books, his architect's models, the expensive coffee maker his parents had given him for his birthday. I watched from the kitchen window as they carried his life out of our house, piece by piece. Marcus didn't come inside. He just supervised from the driveway, his jaw set, his eyes avoiding the windows. When they were done, David drove away. Marcus sat in his car for a moment, his hands on the steering wheel. For a second, I thought maybe he'd come back inside. Maybe he'd realize that what he was doing was insane. Maybe we could talk about this like adults. But he didn't. He started the car and drove away. I sat at the kitchen table and cried until my head hurt. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to pull myself together. I went to work. I performed my job. I sat in meetings with the Velocity team and pretended that my entire life wasn't imploding. Jennifer noticed something was wrong. She kept asking if I was okay, if there was anything I needed, but I just told her I was tired. Which was true. I was exhausted. I was exhausted by pretending that everything was fine when nothing was fine. I got a call from Marcus's divorce attorney on a Tuesday. He was a man named Robert Chen, no relation to David Chen, though the coincidence made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. Robert was very professional, very kind actually, which somehow made it worse. He explained the process, the filing fees, the timeline, the division of assets. Marcus wasn't asking for anything unreasonable, Robert said. He just wanted his half of the equity in the house, which was roughly $240,000, since we'd paid off about $230,000 of the original $485,000 mortgage. He's also requesting that you buy out his portion, Robert explained, or you both sell the house and split the proceeds. He's willing to be flexible on timing, but he does need to move forward with his life. Move forward with his life, as if leaving his wife and filing for divorce was something he needed to do in order to grow as a person. I need to think about this, I told Robert. I need to talk to my own attorney. I hung up and immediately called a divorce lawyer that Jennifer recommended. Her name was Patricia Morales, and she was sharp as a knife. I met with her on Friday afternoon in her office downtown, and she laid out my options with brutal honesty. "You can try to fight him," Patricia said, leaning back in her chair. "But honestly, Illinois is a no-fault divorce state. He doesn't have to prove you did anything wrong. He just has to prove that your marriage is irretrievably broken. Given that he's already moved out and filed, that's going to be pretty easy to demonstrate." "So what do I do?" I asked. "You can buy him out of the house if you want to keep it. You'll need to refinance the mortgage in your name only, which means you'll need to qualify based on your income alone. With your new salary, that shouldn't be a problem. Or you can sell the house and split the equity. Or you can let him stay in the house temporarily while the divorce proceeds, though I wouldn't recommend that given the circumstances." The circumstances. That was a polite way of saying that my husband had punished me for being successful by leaving me. "There's one more thing," Patricia said, and her tone shifted. "Has he contacted you about anything else? Any communication that seems off?" I shook my head. "Well, keep records of everything. Every text, every email, every phone call. And if he starts behaving erratically or making threats, I want to know immediately. I'm not saying he will, but in my experience, when someone leaves this abruptly and this aggressively, there's usually something else going on beneath the surface." I didn't know what she meant by that at the time. I decided to buy him out. I didn't want to sell the house. I couldn't sell the house. That house was the only thing I had left that felt like mine, like something solid and real in a world that had suddenly become very unstable. So I went to my bank, and I got pre-approved for a new mortgage. The numbers were shocking. I'd be paying off the remaining $230,000 of the original mortgage, plus another $240,000 to buy out Marcus's equity, which meant I'd be taking out a new mortgage for approximately $470,000. My payment would be around $2,700 a month, which was doable on my new salary, but it was tight. It was very tight. I had the paperwork drawn up. I sent it to Marcus through his attorney, and then I waited for him to sign it so we could move forward. He didn't sign it. Instead, 3 weeks later, I got a call from Patricia. She sounded strange, careful. "Ashley, I need you to come into my office, today if possible." "What's happened?" I asked. My heart was already racing. "Just come in," she said. "Bring any financial records you have from the last 2 years." I left work early. I drove downtown with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I got to Patricia's office, she was waiting for me with a folder on her desk. She closed the door behind me before I even sat down. "I had an investigator look into Marcus's finances," Patricia said without preamble, "the ones he disclosed to us as part of the discovery process. Ashley, your husband has been taking money out of your joint savings account, significant amounts. Over the last 6 months, he's withdrawn $83,000. I stared at her. I didn't understand the words she was saying. "What?" I whispered. $83,000, Patricia repeated, in cash withdrawals, ATM withdrawals, and transfers to an account in his name only. "You didn't authorize these?" I shook my head. I couldn't speak. "Do you know what he was using the money for?" "No," I managed. "No, I have no idea." Patricia slid a piece of paper across her desk. It was a bank statement. I could see the withdrawals clearly, $5,000 here, $3,000 there, sometimes larger amounts. Dates and amounts all listed out. 6 months of my husband stealing from our joint account while he was planning to leave me. "There's more," Patricia said quietly. "Our investigator also looked into his recent activities, his location data from his phone provider, his credit card statements. Ashley, Marcus has been staying at an apartment in Lincoln Park, a very nice apartment, and he's not staying there alone." My mouth went dry. Is there someone else?" I asked. Patricia didn't answer directly. Instead, she slid another piece of paper across the desk. It was a photograph. It showed Marcus, my Marcus, sitting at a restaurant table with his arm around a blonde woman who looked like she was in her late 20s. They were laughing. He was looking at her the way he used to look at me. "Her name is Sophia Reeves," Patricia said. "She's a junior architect at his firm. She's been working there for about 8 months. According to the timeline, they started seeing each other around the same time the money withdrawals began." I couldn't breathe. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart so hard that it stopped beating. "He left me for someone else," I said. The words didn't sound real. They sounded like they were coming from someone else, someone in a movie or a book, not from me. "It appears so," Patricia said gently, "and he was planning to do it all along. He wasn't leaving because he was unhappy with your success. He was leaving because he'd already found someone new and wanted to split the assets before you found out about her." I stood up. I had to stand up because if I sat there any longer, I thought I might scream. "What do we do?" I asked. "How do we prove this? How do we—" "I don't know what the legal term is, but he can't just get away with this. He can't just steal my money and leave me for some girl and then take half the house." Patricia smiled, and it was a smile I'd seen many times over the next several months. It was the smile of a lawyer who had just been handed the winning move in a chess game she'd already been planning to win. "Oh, Ashley," she said, "he absolutely cannot get away with this. Not on my watch." The next morning, I called Jennifer and asked if I could take a personal day. I didn't go to the office. Instead, I sat in Patricia's conference room with a legal pad, and we made a plan. Marcus had made a critical mistake. He'd been too confident, too sure of himself, too convinced that I was too busy with my job to notice that he was emptying our savings account and building a life with someone else. He'd left a paper trail that was crystal clear. He'd been stupid enough to use his own credit cards at restaurants and hotels. He'd been stupid enough to let his location data tell the story of exactly where he was and who he was with. And most importantly, he'd given us everything we needed to prove that his entire narrative, that he'd left because he was unhappy with my success, was a lie. It took Patricia 3 weeks to file the amended divorce petition. When she did, she included documents detailing the unauthorized withdrawals, the investigation results, the photographs, the hotel receipts, everything. She filed it in such a way that it would be difficult for Marcus's attorney to argue that any of it was inadmissible. She also filed a motion to freeze his bank accounts, pending the outcome of the divorce, claiming that he posed a flight risk given his demonstrated pattern of financial misconduct. Marcus's attorney, a man named Gerald Hoffman, called Patricia within an hour of receiving the documents. I wasn't in the room, but Patricia told me later that Gerald had been furious, not at us, at Marcus. He apparently didn't tell his own attorney about the money, Patricia said with satisfaction, or about Sophia. Gerald said something along the lines of, "My client has been less than forthcoming about certain details of his situation," which is lawyer speak for, "My client is a complete idiot and he's about to lose everything." The discovery process became ugly. Marcus tried to argue that the money withdrawals were for legitimate expenses, that he'd been planning to pay me back, that it was all a misunderstanding. His attorney filed motion after motion, trying to get the documents thrown out, arguing that the investigator had violated Marcus's privacy. None of it worked. Patricia had been thorough, and she had been smart. But the thing that really broke Marcus wasn't the money. It was the testimony. Sophia Reeves came forward. I don't know if she did it because she felt guilty, or because Marcus had done to her what he'd done to me, or because she'd hired her own attorney and realized that she was about to be dragged into a very public divorce proceeding. But she gave a deposition, and in that deposition, she said that Marcus had told her he was leaving his wife months before he actually did it. She said he'd told her that he felt like a failure because his wife was more successful than him. She said he'd told her that he didn't love me anymore, that he hadn't loved me in years, that he was only staying because he didn't know how to leave. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. He told me he was going to hurt her, Sophia said in her deposition. He said that the best way to make her understand how he felt was to take away the one thing she cared about more than anything else, her house. He said he was going to leave her, take half the equity, and then make sure she lost it. He said he wanted her to understand what it felt like to have everything taken away. I read that transcript in Patricia's office, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just anger, though there was plenty of that. It was clarity. Marcus hadn't left me because my success had made him feel small. He'd left me because he was a vindictive, calculating person who had decided that the best response to his own inadequacy was to destroy me. The trial was set for late November. It was going to be a nightmare. Marcus and I would have to sit in the same room. We'd have to listen to testimony about the worst parts of our relationship. Our marriage, which had once felt like the most private and sacred thing in my life, was going to be dissected in front of a judge and a courtroom full of strangers. But I was ready. The morning of the trial, I wore a dark blue suit and my best armor, confidence. I sat at the table next to Patricia, and I watched as Marcus walked into the courtroom with Gerald Hoffman. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight. There were dark circles under his eyes. His hair looked like he hadn't combed it in weeks. He looked like a man who had finally realized that his plan had failed catastrophically. The judge, a woman named Margaret Osborne, was in her 60s and had the kind of expression that suggested she'd seen every version of human betrayal and stupidity in her courtroom and wasn't impressed by any of it. Patricia presented her case methodically. She presented the bank statements. She presented the investigator's report. She presented the photographs. She presented Sophia's deposition testimony. And then she presented me. I testified for 4 hours. I talked about our marriage. I talked about how I'd supported Marcus's career, how I'd been proud of his work, how I'd never asked him to choose between my success and his. I talked about the day he left, about the text message, about the coldness in his eyes. And I talked about the moment I realized that he'd been planning to destroy me the entire time. "Did you know he was seeing someone else?" Patricia asked me. "No," I said. "I had no idea. I thought the problem was my promotion. I thought if I could just make him understand that his success was important to me too, we could fix it. I didn't know that he'd already decided to leave. I didn't know that while I was at work, trying to save our marriage and build my career, he was planning how to hurt me." "And how does that make you feel?" Patricia asked. I looked at Marcus. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "It makes me feel like I wasted 6 years of my life on someone who never respected me," I said quietly. "It makes me feel like I was stupid for believing that our marriage meant something to him. And it makes me angry that he tried to use my own success against me, that he made me question whether I'd done something wrong by being good at my job." Gerald Hoffman's cross-examination was brutal, but it didn't matter. He tried to suggest that I'd been neglectful, that I'd pushed Marcus away with my ambition, that I'd created the situation that led to him seeking companionship elsewhere. But every time he made an argument, Patricia had a document or a piece of evidence that contradicted it. Every time he tried to paint Marcus as a victim of my success, Patricia would present another bank statement showing that Marcus had been planning this all along. And then Gerald made a mistake. He asked me if I had any regrets about how I'd handled my marriage. "Yes," I said. "I regret that I didn't see who Marcus really was until it was too late. I regret that I spent so much time trying to save a marriage that he'd already decided to destroy. And I regret that I let his insecurity about my success make me question whether I deserved to be successful in the first place." Patricia smiled. Judge Osborne ruled in my favor on every major point. Marcus had to pay back the $83,000 he'd withdrawn from our joint account, plus interest and penalties. The house remained mine. He got his equity, but I didn't have to sell. He was ordered to pay my legal fees, which amounted to $38,000. And most importantly, the judge made a specific finding that Marcus's conduct had been willful and malicious, which meant that his retirement accounts and his future earnings were subject to additional division in my favor. "It appears," Judge Osborne said from the bench, "that Mr. Thompson entered into this divorce proceeding with the express intention of punishing his wife for her professional success. His actions, the secret withdrawal of marital funds, the hidden relationship, the documented statements about his intent to cause her financial harm, all of these demonstrate a pattern of behavior that this court finds to be contemptible. While this court does not condone bad behavior on either side of a marital dissolution, Mr. Thompson's conduct goes beyond the normal acrimony of divorce. It is calculated, deliberate, and designed to inflict maximum harm on the plaintiff. The court will therefore award damages accordingly. I didn't cry in the courtroom. I didn't cry until I got to Patricia's car in the parking garage. And then I sat in the passenger seat, and I cried for everything that had happened, for everything I'd lost, for the years I'd wasted on someone who had never valued me. Patricia sat with me in silence for a long time. Finally, she said, "You won. You should know that." "I don't feel like I won," I said. "I know," she said, "but you did. And more importantly, he lost. He gambled that you wouldn't find out what he was doing. He gambled that he could take your money, destroy you financially, and walk away to start a new life with someone younger. He lost that gamble, spectacularly." A week later, I got a text from Marcus. Just 3 words: "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'd already spent 6 years of my life on him, and I wasn't going to spend another second thinking about his regret. I threw myself into my work. The Velocity account continued to grow. Jennifer gave me another raise. I was promoted to Executive Vice President, reporting directly to the CEO. I bought new furniture for the house, furniture that was mine, that I'd chosen, that didn't remind me of Marcus. I redecorated the bedroom. I painted the kitchen. I took the tomatoes and basil out of the garden and planted flowers instead, bright, colorful flowers that made me smile every time I looked at them. 6 months after the trial, I ran into Sophia at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. She was alone, sitting at a table by the window, looking absolutely miserable. For a moment, I considered walking right past her, but something made me stop. "Hi, Sophia," I said. She looked up and her face went white. "Oh my God, Ashley, I'm so sorry about everything. I never meant—" "I know," I said. "I just want you to know that you dodged a bullet. Marcus is exactly who he showed himself to be. You got lucky that you found out early." I left before she could respond. I didn't need an apology from her. I didn't need anything from her. I just needed her to know that I was fine. Better than fine. I was thriving. A year after the divorce was finalized, I stood in my kitchen, my beautiful kitchen that I'd renovated with my own money, in my beautiful house that was entirely mine. And I thought about the woman I'd been the day Marcus left. I thought about how small she'd felt, how inadequate, how she'd questioned whether she deserved her own success. And I thought about how that woman didn't exist anymore. I'd learned something important through all of this. Success isn't about the people who don't believe in you. It's about becoming the person who believes in yourself so completely that no one else's doubt can touch you. Marcus had tried to use my success as a weapon against me, but instead, he'd shown me exactly what I was capable of. He'd shown me that I could lose everything and still rebuild. He'd shown me that I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. The divorce had cost me time, money, and heartbreak. But it had also cost Marcus everything: his marriage, his reputation at his firm. Sophia had told me during her deposition that he'd been asked to resign, and his future. Sophia had left him 3 months after the trial. Last I heard, he was living in a studio apartment in Pilsen and working as a freelance draftsman, taking whatever projects he could get. I didn't feel sorry for him, but I also didn't hate him anymore. He was just a cautionary tale, a man who'd let his own insecurity destroy everything good in his life because he couldn't handle the fact that his wife was more successful than he was. I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well, building a life that's so full and so rich and so completely yours that you don't have room for regret or bitterness. It's waking up every morning and knowing that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're meant to be doing, and that no one, not Marcus, not anyone, can take that away from you. And that, I realized, was worth everything.